I'm on mute. Hello again. I am a white man wearing glasses and rather bizarrely a camouflage top, which I've never even seen before, but somewhere it's in my wardrobe. Anyway, looks rather odd here. I haven't done it on purpose. I'm going to talk about some history and mainly looking at the impact that these regenerative projects have and how they are taken on, how they're adopted or changed or degenerated, in fact, in some cases. So this is, I'm the director of Grizedale Arts, and I have been for 20 years. So I've been in post for a long time, which is quite unusual in the art world. Perhaps there's many benefits to that, perhaps some disadvantages too. I inherited this project, the one that we see on the screen now, which was first initiated in 1977, and was the idea really of it was to place artists in a working environment, so a little bit akin to Barbara Stavini, John Latham's artist placement scheme project. And initially the artists spent time working alongside industry in an industrial forest, in effect, a forest run by the Forestry Commission, with the principal purpose of timber extraction on a reasonably large scale. So the first artist that really set the tone and the blueprint for the project in general was David Nash. And I mean, I think from my perspective, it was always at the time, it was a very interesting project because it looked at public art wasn't what it is now. It was the very early days of the kind of public art as we now understand it. But it was also asking artists to make the best of the resources that were around them, that it wasn't about bringing material in, it was about generating work from what was already there. And it wasn't about creating an attraction, it was about developing the artist's work and developing the way that people understood the space and understood the environment. What happened when I say, all my slides have what happened when it works. So it really did work. It was hugely successful in terms of engaging people with the forest environment, woodland environment, opening up the woodlands to recreation to some extent. And that was because people found art. They weren't told it was there. They had to discover it, and they didn't know what it was. So it was just things they came across in the woods, and that was very intriguing. What happened to it is it became more and more formulaic, and people started to understand it as a potential resource to exploit for other reasons, principally tourism. So sorry, I won't jump ahead there. So so it is still functional, but it's very much a tourist attraction. And so although I inherited this this project in 1999 when I first started, my immediate response was to try and reinvent it and regenerate its function, really, its role, what it was doing for the culture, rural culture, and how it explained that culture to people, to visitors. So I should say that the Lake District is an enormously powerful tourist attraction. So it's the second largest attraction after London and has 19 million visitors a year to a relatively small area of land with a population of 40,000. So as the old sculpture park was reinvented with younger artists coming in, I mean, there was a huge number of projects. I'm not going to go into them all. You can find them all on the website. But basically a different generation of artists engaging with the same context. This shift of its function and its continual, the adoption of it as a tourist attraction, which was beyond our control, really, as an arts organisation became increasingly frustrating, and we organised a swap where we gave the forest sculptures to the Forestry Commission to manage, and they gave us a series of derelict buildings, which were kind of beyond use, had pretty much fallen down, and an area of about 10 hectares of land, which again had being contained within a forest environment, was a very arid, non-biodiverse space. There was literally nothing there. There was no wildlife. And over the past 15 years, we have basically, using the resources available on site to a large extent, have slowly reinvented this space. And I think probably the thing that's most gratifying about the site is the way that the extraordinary biodiversity of this tiny space trapped between various other land management systems that surround it, and the extraordinary biodiversity that has been generated. But over what is an incredibly slow process. I mean, it's 20 years basically of improving soil that has created it. The building itself was renovated and improved over that period of time, and all of this done with working with artists and creative people from different sectors, finding ways of reinventing what was already there. So it didn't really have a history as a farm. So it's 600 feet above sea level. There's very little soil. It's an extremely wet place. So it's a very difficult environment, which is one of the reasons we're kind of attracted to it. Sounds a bit strange, but anyway, it seems to have been the course of my career, has been attracted to difficult things to see if you can make them work. And what happens when it works? Well, it sort of turns into a luxury hotel, which is then something that other people want, and becomes quite threatened in being. We don't actually own it, so we lease it, and so we have problems now with retaining the lease and retaining the function for the site, and finding ways for it to be self-sustaining, continuing its role, hosting artists and creative people from all walks of life, as a kind of and I suppose as a way of demonstrating what can happen with landscape, with the biosystem over a period of time. So that, again, the emphasis for something like this then becomes drawn into the other uses, mostly about making more money. So at the same time we were evolving Lawson Park, we changed the way the arts organisation worked, away from finding artists and creating art projects and encouraging the community to enjoy those projects for whatever reasons we were able to put forward, towards the idea of only working to invitation. So we switched the whole programme to only accepting invitations from communities and actually also arts organisations and festivals and biennales and the rest of it. But principally that centred around working to invitation, or to the invitation of different communities. One of the big projects we did at that time was the reinvention of the Constant Institute, which was the village hall in the village. And we created a whole series of projects, again, taking a semi-derelict building and turning it into a viable, thriving visitor community centre, with the ambition of kind of regenerating, rethinking the relationships throughout the whole community, the village, the relationships between tourism, between older generation, younger generation, all the usual things that you'd think of, trying to reinvent and it worked. And the village hall went from this unused, unloved, decrepit space into a thriving centre which was generating, does generate around £250,000 a year, which is a fairly good chunk of income, but without any grant aid.
Sorry, Adam, you are 5 minutes.
Okay, with no grant aid. So that, you know, suddenly it's become something that's really quite viable in terms of, again, desirability. So again, what happens is that parts of the community, principally people who attend meetings and sit on councils, decide that actually by taking over, they can get more control over the site and reducing the amount of educational and arts and creative programs, they could make more money from it. So that's what's happened. For me, obviously, quite disappointing, and in many ways, but in other ways, very positive, because it's a project that's genuinely been adopted and taken on by the community, but rather broad term, the word community. What didn't happen was, fully happen, was the kind of impetus that the whole project, the bigger holistic program, including our international program, and of which this is an example, project in Japan, where we try to establish exchange between the different communities that we're working with, so that not necessarily to inspire people, but to not in such a direct way. It's just an opportunity to work in a different place and see that people dealing with similar problems and finding other ways of solving or not solving those problems, and that sort of generates its own dynamism in all the communities we work with. So you see this kind of impact of that flowing through and changing and becoming the driver behind change, and that sort of broadening of that influence and philosophy. So that's ongoing, apart from the COVID hiccup. What we've done during COVID was to purchase quite a large pub, or an inn, with 6 acres, and we're using it as the hub and the gateway into a whole geographical area, the valley. But I guess that is fairly conceptual, it's not strictly geographical, with the idea of kind of restructuring and rethinking a lot of these problems, using the same methodologies that we've made, where we've had great achievement, but restructuring how those systems operate and trying to create a level, balanced way of working between these different cultures, where one doesn't have the opportunity to consume the other. So localism doesn't consume the art culture isn't consumed by blah blah, doesn't consume the community. So it's a project where we have set it up in such a way as we are the kind of backstop as the arts organization. We have a level of control, but it is fundamentally a community project, and it's largely been funded through community endorsement and actual money. We haven't looked to the funders to make it work. And the project itself, I think, I haven't talked about funding very much, but I think one of the things we've been trying to do for many years is move away from the funded model. And this is another iteration of that, where this, as a business, generates the income that makes the whole thing function, and is that itself is a contribution to this kind of leveling up ambition in terms of.
You're about a minute to go, Adam.
In terms of cultural hierarchies. I'm done.
Oh, wow, fantastic. Great. Well, thank you so much. I have quite a bit of questions for you that I'm hoping to be able to address in the breakout room. I'm really fascinated by the collaboration with Japan and you know, this dynamic of collaboration with communities and sort of this cycle. So thank you very much for that.